Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing off 1.21.4, which adds this new biome here called the Pale Garden, a more mountainous version of the Dark Oak Forest, which has a new impervious monster called the Creaking, and it has a whole bunch of stuff inside of it. Even if it might not look like the most interesting biome, it's surely something to change the game at least a little bit, and it adds a bunch of new cool blocks. So without further ado, let's investigate what the Pale Garden and 121.4 add. Right here you can see it's 1.21.4. It has a name actually, the Garden Awakens. So it's a name, not particularly interesting. And since there's a lot of things going on the technical end, I'm going to let it scroll through. Essentially, a whole new wood type, then a bunch of new properties here for data packers. You can now add tints to items using data packs as well. And then, of course, we have the Pale Garden itself, a variant of the Dark Oak Forest, which generates based off of the erosion value. Then we have a whole bunch of miscellaneous changes, such as, nether bricks now matching other blocks. Then we have resin clumps, a new thing, and that's a new frequency vibrator by skulk sensors. And then ender chests now drop obsidian even when mined without pickaxe, a bunch of these minor changes here. Then continue reading if you want. And then, of course, this being a minor update, of course, has a bunch of bug fixes. 205 from before 121. And this includes the fall damage ignoring exploit, so womp womp to people who use that. But otherwise, a bunch of good changes here, and we have a new biome. Right here, you can see it's the same Pale Garden as I was showing in the intro, and this thing can usually generate a little bit scattered, and not all Dark Oak Forests will have them. Notably, you can tell because the white leaves and the sky changes its color. I haven't loaded in all the nearby areas, but you can see it likes generating slightly more mountainous. And notice there's a river over there, and it's avoiding the rivers, which leads me to believe this biome might be based on something called the weirdness value. Essentially, if you want to be finding a Pale Garden, search for plateaus that involve Dark Oak Forest. You can usually find a thin strand of these around mountains. So if you have a mountain that is near a Dark Oak Forest, then perhaps check there again, and feel free to wipe chunks using an external program if you haven't explored those areas already fully. Then for a quick stroll around, there are no animals, and you can see we have the pale oak tree. They are called pale oaks, but typically they are just dark oaks, although pale dark oak does not roll off the tongue. And for some of the things in here, you can see we have these vines. They're not climbable, so, womp about that. There are no animals, and hostile mobs will spawn here normally. But notably, you can see how there's a bunch of moss around. And yes, this is recolored moss, but pale moss is interesting because you can see here, well, oops, accidental screenshot. Well, we have this moss riding up on the tree. If you bone meal this moss, then you can get some cool implications where it will ride up the tree like that. It can only go up so high. Then we have eye blossoms. And gonna give myself a little bit of night vision for this. If it's nighttime, then they'll do something pretty. They'll bloom. So you have to give it a moment, but you can see here, they're blooming now. And well, that's a really cool mechanic. Walking around here at night, you'll notice it's just about any other biome. Of course, it's dark, but that's nighttime in general. But when you walk around the biome, you can see, look, there's that little flash, and look, there's someone here. So if I look away, it's gonna follow me. And these guys are called the Creaking. They're quite hostile, and combined with other mobs in the area, well, they can be a mild threat. And you can see they deal a decent amount of damage, not too high. But what if I want to kill it? You can see it's now leading me to a nearby tree, but now it's enraged. It's going to chase me at an incredible speed, but only when I'm not looking at it. So you can actually increase your FOV in order to see it anyways. You'll notice this is actually pretty fast fellow. So you actually have to be a little bit careful in here, especially if you aggravate multiple creatures at once. Even though it's not anything like the Warden, although its design looks a lot like a scrapped Warden design, so it's certainly a threat you have to deal with. And in order to defeat it, you need to be exploring this biome a little bit more. And of course, whenever I attack them, they lead me to... And you can see there's a little bit of resin in there. And this resin marks the Creaking's heart. And as I mine it, you can see there's this amber colored block. This is a Creaking heart. And when I mine it, you can see that one is having a little bit of a heart attack, and now it's gone. And this is how the Creaking works. And I even got a little bit of resin out of this, which is an interesting block in its own right, and it can even be used for armor trims. Now, for a little bit more of the general things you can get from here. Of course, like I said about armor trims, quick silence stuff real quick, since, you know, silence is the best thing for showing off armor. And then, of course, on my weird Minecraft skin, I did actually make it myself. Probably tell. Well, it's quite orange. Didn't like the brownness of copper? Well, now you don't have to deal with it. And then we have the block set here. Get back to midnight in order for a creek showcase in a moment. But notice, this is the resin block set. It is neon orange, and it works really well. And I'll even be showing a build I made with it in a moment to see what this really adds to the game. Then, we have the pale set up here. Has some... Now, for some of the things that you can expect to get from this biome, you can see, of course, Creaking Heart and the Creaking over there. Then there's a bunch of resin. Resin is this new neon orange block set. Really useful for a bunch of things. But, of course, it is pretty much solely decorative. If you're going into the Pale Garden expecting to get anything treasury like a mace, well, you're not getting that, but I think that's completely okay. I've already made videos on saying why the Pale Garden was bad and then they fixed it and now it's actually quite cool. It doesn't need a new crazy treasure or a crazy new structure. It's just a biome. But you can see up here, I have a little bit more of a medieval set. You can see the little pale, pun intended. Then you can even apply these resin clumps to things. As for the door, also you could see for a moment the actual resin armor trim. Right here is the door. Looks pretty nice. And then for the armor trim, this is of course on silence on top of my weird homemade Minecraft skin. Well, it's neon orange. So pretty much, orange enjoyers, you now have orange. Rats. You can smelt down the resin clumps into resin bricks in order to craft this stuff and use it as the armor trim, or you can leave it as this in order to apply it. I personally quite enjoy applying it to leaves in order to give them a little fruit. You can apply this to an oak tree to get an orange tree, of course non-functional. And then, a little bit more of what the Creaking showcase is. So of course you can see it over there, freezes, then going to attack it in order to enrage it, and now, going into second person, you can see how quick it is. It is one of the only things in the game that can outspeed a sprinting player. Not just match it like the Wither, or completely ignore you altogether like the Ender Dragon, but it straight up not be outrun. And then, when I attack it, it creates this resin, gonna let it get a little bit closer. And then when I attack it, you can see it makes more resin, and then I can scrape it off. You know, you can make a lot of farms using wolves out of these. And then, of course, you need an axe in order to break this in any reasonable amount of time, and then it dies. Naturally, it is invincible. However, if you spawn it through spawn eggs, get yourself something non-damaging like a snowball, you can see a little bit of a bug here. Notice it just makes a default hurt noise. Actually, this is not possible to achieve in gameplay. However, if you manage to do it, well, hooray, you found a bug. Also, here's its hitbox. It doesn't fully align, but it's so asymmetrical I don't think it matters. But overall, I think the Creaking is a pretty cool mob, has a pretty cool block set. While this update's not anything crazy, well, think about it. This was announced in October, and this is December 3rd, and we already have it. It's a very small feature, doesn't have any new treasures, nothing too game-breaking. We only have a few decorative blocks. But I think that is perfectly fine. Just got a free update with a new block set. Even if PvPers aren't going to gain anything out of this, well, still it's pretty interesting to see what this update has to offer for how small it is. Now, like I said earlier, I was going to show off what you can build with this. Of course, I'm Gearsaw Studios. I make tutorials usually. So, of course, tutorial included in the top right. But right here, I'm in spectator mode so I can pass through things. But all this neon orange works really well for a block set. You can make a cool base like this, incorporating various pale garden assets and other orange blocks throughout the game. You have your pale wood, do a whole lot with this block set. And if you don't want to work with resin, you can still enjoy the biome's aesthetic, like this cemetery I made for Halloween. Very reminiscent of a certain level from a certain game, but still, it works very well with Tough in order to make a nice monotone, well, not nice, but a monotone atmosphere. And you always have the creaking for noises. Do a whole lot with this whole block set. It works very well with many, many different blocks. Even if you don't personally enjoy the Pale Garden, probably are going to have a hard time denying that the Pale Garden has a bunch of cool blocks you can work with. Since there's no music added with the Pale Garden, in fact it fades out music when you walk into it, it's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, remember, please like and subscribe, it really helps me out. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.